show you go on. Near, far.
Better this week. Thanks for asking. It was a little rough to have you listen to all the chess stuff last week, I'm sure. I'm a little on fire today, which is why I had to change my mind about my ensemble and put on some red. Because today we get to roll around in one of our 12 divine faculties that is named Divine Order. Over 100 years ago, Unity's co-founder Charles Fillmore wrote about something that he named our 12 powers. And each of our 12 powers has a body point, an associated disciple, a color, and I'm missing something. Oh, definition. It means something. So, divine order, if you want to go there, it's about a couple of inches below your navel. If you'd like to just get in touch with that center in your body for a moment. It is olive green. I have no idea why. It is associated with the disciple James, not James, son of Zebedee, who is wisdom. It's the other James. I don't know why that is either. And the definition. So divine order, as I made a note in our E-News Weekly this week, divine order I feel like is one of the most misunderstood, misspoken, misrepresented faculties. I'm curious, when you think about divine order, when you hear divine order, what does that mean to a few of us? Divine order, just what's your understanding of that?
The right and perfect outcome for all.
The right and perfect outcome for all. Divine order. How many want to define it by saying, well, it's order? You know? Anybody else? Divine order, what do you think of? Got a couple over here. I'll be back. Sharon? So one here and one here. Excuse me, hon. And then you can pass it back.
A path to living. It's a path to living life.
A path to living?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. Never heard anybody say that before.
My expression on the journey.
I'm so sorry, I'm just climbing all over your feet. Your expression and joy?
My expression on the journey.
Your expression on the journey. And Sharon?
I see it as my alignment with God's directions when I put all myself in attention and my attention to God's direction.
Alignment with God's direction and focusing your attention on God's direction. Our path for living, our expression on the journey, outcome for all. Can you relate to those ideas? I remember when I reread this particular chapter in Charles Fillmore, and those of you who've been in on our other discussions of the 12 powers, you know I think I have 5 or 6 books written about the 12 powers, and in general I've kind of drawn on all of those resources, but Fillmore is so rich and so juicy that we're using him as our resource for today. So when I reread the chapter, I have no idea how many times I've read this book. I feel like this really bright light blinked on in me. I came to a greater understanding of divine order about 12 or 14 years ago. I was in ministerial school, and one of my housemates and friends walked in I was sitting in the kitchen reading, and they walked in the kitchen and plopped down at the table and said, what is divine order anyway? And I said, well, order. Like, order. So I had been participating in a group with my metaphysical guru, Reverend Paul Hesselbeck, called Brown Bag Metaphysics. So the next day was a metaphysics group. So I roared into the room before anybody else got there, and I said, hey, Paul, what is divine order? And he goes, that's easy. And he rattled off a definition that I hadn't remembered hearing before. Here's what Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore says about that. And I, paraphrase just slightly to bring it into gender-neutral language. We can never exercise dominion, which we might also know as mastery over life, right? We can never exercise dominion until we know who and what we are. And knowing this brings forth that knowledge into the external by exercising it in divine order, which is mind, idea, expression in action. Isn't that so clear? Mind, idea, expression. Mind being God mind, divine mind, universal mind in us. Idea being divine idea, potential. I mentioned, I think even last week, what does God do all day? I think God is like this really cool bubble machine that just is cranking out ideas, just 24/7, and they're floating around in the ethers, and poof, we catch one every once in a while. That's what I think God is. So there's that. Mind, idea, expression. Barb kind of touched on it, and I'm sorry, I don't know your first name. You kind of touched on it. Pardon? Hi. You kind of touched on it when you said my path for living. And Barb said my journey in expression. So it is who and what and how we manifest spirit in our world. That is divine order. Who knew that? My divine order mantra is, we are divine order in action. Because I gotta say, for my first, at least couple of decades in Unity, whenever I heard anyone make reference to divine order, it always felt like it was out there somewhere. Everything's in divine order. I'm like, could have fooled me. So it's really important to me that we understand divine order is inside out. We also happen to live in a very orderly universe. Have you noticed all of the planets of which we are aware hang out in relationship to one another? As far as I know, and I ain't no physicist or astronomist, but they don't bounce around, and they don't, shift, and they're in divine order. So, as I'm studying this chapter, what flashed through me is this electric knowing that being the expression of divine order, being in alignment with divine order, is like plugging into all of our superpowers. Superpowers beyond our imagination. It's like plugging directly into the currency, the energy of God mind, the energy of divine ideas in which we swim, and the energy of the invisible substance out of which every physical thing comes. everything we put our eyes on, everything, every one that we put our eyes on is a divine idea expressed. Could I just get an amen or a Yahoo, little feedback, little interaction? It's lonesome being the only one that's fired up about this. So activating divine order is really like fueling our lives with the super octane juice of all of the creative forces. Really has to do with expression and manifestation. This is huge, this divine order business. And I'm really fired up about broadening and expanding as a spiritual community, broadening and expanding our framework in that and our understanding of that. You know, one of the most common goals in all of the world religions is getting to heaven. It's really important to lots and lots and lots of people. And one of the many concepts that keeps me in unity is the belief that heaven is not some cloud to which we retire when we leave the planet. Hopefully this is not a news flash for anyone listening to this message, but it could be. Heaven is not a place we go. Heaven isn't a cloud upon which I will bask, being fed chocolate and popcorn and, you know, all my favorites. It's up to us to create heaven here on earth. Do we know, folks, or have we had a personal experience of really being in touch with the experience of heaven on earth? Can we see that around us? Floating in all of those monarchs up in the Upper Peninsula was so amazing. Out kayaking on this enormous lake, and in the middle of nowhere is a monarch floating with me. Like, where are you going? And you got a lot of water to cover. Can we also see around us or sometimes experience hell on earth? Anybody been there? Like recently? Season pass. I could really go some places with that. Make a note of that, because that's a talk waiting to happen. When we pause to ponder, we realize that life could be construed as a very, very, very interesting conundrum. As far as I understand it, it appears that we come from spirit world, and along the way we step through this veil of amnesia, and then we invest our entire life striving to balance our earthly sense consciousness with the truth of us, that we're spirit beings. It's almost like we have to wake up every day and remind ourselves that we're divine order, that we're mind, idea, in expression. And quite frankly, some days I do not get the point of the game. It seems like, I remember talking to Hesselbeck one time about just that whole idea of stepping through the veil and the amnesia and forgetting that we're spirit beings and we come in to do this. And I said, doesn't that just seem like the cruelest joke? So, I don't know, I'm on the fence about that idea. I've read a lot about it. So for some reason, when we're in spirit world, we get ourselves all whipped into a frenzy about returning to earth. We get so excited about experiencing the relative realm. We get so excited about coming into these little skin suits and rattling around in our limited little minds that we call the universe. I think amnesia happens on both sides of the veil. Because I think when we're leaving this and going into spirit world, man, we forget how much work it was. And we're like, let me go back, let me do some more stuff. Fillmore has an interesting phrase for this, this sense consciousness. He calls it brain thinking. And he tells us that brain thinking is a vibratory process that uses up brain tissue. Does anybody feel like they're kind of squat out of brain tissue by the end of the day? Like some days we tend to burn through quite a bit. And I tend to refer to the brain thinking as mental mania. I was sitting on our patio reading the other day, and we have this beautiful little bonsai tree that the boys gave to Bill. And so I'm just sort of pondering the bonsai, and in comes this little flying critter, and he lands on one of the bonsai leaves, which is about this big. And I watch him like for 2 or 3 minutes, and he goes round and round, round and round and round and round and round, never move to another leaf, round the leaf. And I'm sitting there watching him, and I say out loud, "Welcome to my mind." I mean, do we not chase our thoughts? It was a space this big, guys, and it was like... And do we not chase our thoughts round and round and round the mental mania arena, attempting to live our life from that place and attempting to solve all of the problems in our human, earthly, sense-conscious level? Have you noticed it's impossible? Have you noticed it's exhausting? Have you noticed it's frustrating? I guess... part of me thinks maybe we're just meant to do that until we can't anymore. And then we realize there must be a better option. I remember one of my minister pals saying to me, who was, just in a really, really bad place, and saying to me through tears, "How much longer is it going to be like this?" And me saying to her, "Until you can't do it for one more second. And then something else will arise." So the deal is, as I see it, most of us have unwittingly bound ourselves in these very heavy chains of brain thinking, of mental mania, of error thoughts. And over time, it's just so ingrained in our consciousness that over time we sort of look over our shoulder and go, "Hey, what happened to that heaven on earth idea? Like, is it totally shot?" And I don't know if any of you have ever been in this boat, but every once in a while I can even convince myself that I am the only one in the room that doesn't have it together. That I'm the only one in the room that just doesn't get how to do life. Is anybody else the only one in the room? That phrase, "misery loves company"? That's not how I mean it. And at the same time, it's comforting to know that our fellow spiritual travelers are sharing parts of our experience, which is why we choose to be a part of a spiritual community, because we are sitting beside someone who's in a different lap on the leaf, or maybe they've even jumped to a bigger leaf, and they can help us understand this too shall pass, one of my other life mantras. So here's the deal with divine order. As long as we stay in our brain thinking, as long as we stay in our mental mania, as long as we're looking out there for our capabilities, for order, for contentment, for heaven on earth or peace, we are destined to stay in our chains. Yes? If we think it's out there somewhere, if we think it's something that we don't already embody, it's going to be a little tougher to unlock those chains. And like I was saying in the example with my friend, when you can't do it one more second, Fillmore says, we cry out, who will deliver me from the chains that bind me? Who will deliver me? You know what Fillmore and Jesus said about that? It's good news. It is your privilege to be as free as the birds, the trees, the flowers. They toil not, neither do they spin, but are always obedient to the divine instinct, and their every day is a Sabbath. I love this. We are never more to be frightened by an accusing conscience or by the possibility of misunderstanding divine law. It is our privilege to be free. If anyone is so moved to affirm that with me, it is my privilege to be free. It is my privilege to be free. You know, if I were a tattoo-getting person, seriously, like, I would get that. It is my privilege to be free. Guess who gets to set us free? This is the fun part of unity. This is what we all love about it. Our self-reliability, our self-accountability, our knowing that, yes, it's up to us, and at the same time, it's not up to us from that level of brain thinking. It's not up to us from that level of exhausting ourselves from mental mania, solving all of our problems. Because this divine order is inherent in us, along with a whole lot of other great mojo. We have everything it takes to dig our way out of the mental mania trenches. We've got, for those of you that have the Revealing Word by Fillmore at home, go to the little section that says law. Let me just name 3 or 4 laws that have to do with this divine order thing and coming out of the trenches. Evolutionary law, the upward trend of all things, the individual rising of us from sense consciousness to spiritual consciousness. And they're not 2 different things, it's a continuum of evolution. Then we have the law of infinite expansion, the principle of never ceasing growth and development toward the fulfillment of God's perfect idea and expression. Mind, idea, expression. And then we have the law of righteousness, the law of spiritual and mental growth that is raising us from sense consciousness to spiritual consciousness. Are you catching the theme? Getting ourselves out of the trenches, getting ourselves out of those chains, getting ourselves to freedom has to do with moving through our limited sense consciousness and allowing space for spiritual consciousness to light up in us. Did you know we had a law of thought purification? It's kind of like that brain thinking shower. It's a rule of mind action whereby we overcome the world, the flesh, and error thinking by building what? Spiritual consciousness. So we got all that working for us, and applying any one of those, certainly applying all of them, they all work in conjunction, is our pathway out of the prison. These laws operate all the time. All the time. And when we employ them, when we knowingly choose to make use of them, we are already on our path to freedom. I think a lot of us, I did a series on it years and years ago. We might need to shake the dust off of that and look at it again. But it's a series about a story in the Hebrew Bible where the people of Israel are enslaved in Egypt. And Moses is the lead actor. So one day he's up, on the mountaintop chilling. And God starts talking to him, and then this bush is aflame before his very eyes. Now, the bush is not consumed by the fire. It's lit up from the inside out. So that's what happens when we plug into our divine order. God says, I want you to trot over to Egypt, round up a whole bunch of people, and haul them out of slavery to this place called Canaan, the promised land. And Moses said, oh, I don't think so. Not a public speaker, not a natural leader. Who gonna follow me? You should be talking to my brother. He's a good public speaker. And then the bush lit up. So be careful when the divine ideas come in and you're shaking your head going, oh, I don't think so. Because divine ideas don't let go of us. We know that, right? They do not let go of us. So we have this little seed in us, and we must consciously nurture that seed with the assistance of these divine laws. Is there anyone with us who thinks that they're moving along this spiritual continuum at a snail's pace? It's important to us to remember, Fillmore tells us, that these thoughts, this spiritual consciousness to which we aspire, these thoughts grow at an extremely rapid pace when truth is the nucleus, when we line up with divine order, when we line up with divine law. And Fillmore says, don't hang out. Don't let that mental mania simmer and stew. Just don't let that overtake us all. He says we must set ourselves afire with these strong words of absolute truth. It is my privilege to be free. Yes? Yes. So we employ our tools of denial and affirmation. Some of us are familiar with that. Does that mean we deny the mental mania? Like, trust me, those around you can see you doing laps around the leaf. So we don't deny that the mental mania is happening, but we deny that it has any power in our consciousness. We deny that it has anything to do with spiritual truth. And I have a little visualization of the mental mania. Mine's really active at night. The mental mania, like flowing out the window, down the side of the house, to the street, and down the drain storm. Just let it, you don't have to tell it to stop, because it won't. The mind thinks, I learned. So it's denying that it has any power, and it's just letting it flow out of it. And of course, I suggest mindful living and mindful meditation as key tools. These are perhaps our most direct route to plugging into the spiritual law, plugging into the presence. So that Moses trip and our snail's pace, I was thinking, doesn't it feel like we're taking the long and winding road to Canaan? I don't know if you've ever seen one of our chows, Rufus Thomas, on a walk. He's a very serpentine guy. Zoe, man, she knows where we're going. She does not deviate. Rufus is like, well, here's some show. Oh, there's a leaf over there. So we're on this long and winding road, and it kind of makes Moses' 40-year trip looked like a walk in the park, doesn't it? When you think about how many decades we've all been at this business. Through our journey, like all of these divine laws to which I referred, through our journey, Fillmore promises that the personal I, the human identity, continues to take on, or I would almost visualize it in the opposite. We continue to peel away those human layers and all of the defenses, and what's underneath all of it is the supreme I am. It is my privilege to be free. And that brings us back full circle. Fillmore says, when we become so at one with God mind as to feel it consciously, we also recognize this eternal peace in which all things are accomplished. We can never exercise mastery of life until we know who and what we are. And we bring forth that knowledge in mind, idea, expression. Let us step into a sacred space of allowing whatever truths arose in you in these past several minutes. We're all invited to breathe into the truth that is made aware to us today. We're all invited to lean into the spiritual consciousness that is at the ready to show up as the supreme I am. I know who I am. I know what I am. I know that I am here in this earthly realm by my choosing. I know I am in this skin suit of my choosing. And I know that I came here to express divine consciousness, source, life, love, law, principle. I know that I am a unique stamp, a unique facet, a unique shining crystal of the divine light. And I look all around me in my life. I can find it in myself to realize I am looking through eyes of divine love. Every living thing I see is an expression of divine order, is an expression of source, life, love, law, mind, principle. It is my privilege to be free. Be still and know that I am. And so it is. It is my privilege to be free. Thank you, Nina Bell.
Brothers gather round.